Well, 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 what do we have here? This time on Jeremy Shows, we have the Amstrad CPC 464. This was a computer that was released in the mid-80s in the UK, and it spawned a series of computers, the Amstrad CPC range. It went on to have the Amstrad CPC 664, I believe, which was very short-lived. It was basically this computer with a disk drive instead of a tape drive. And after that was the CPC 6128, which was this computer with the built-in disk drive, plus an additional 64 kilobytes of RAM. After that was the Amstrad CPC 464 Plus, which was basically this computer in a redesigned case, and the 6128 Plus, which was a redesigned 6128 in a similar case to the 464 Plus. This computer was quite popular for its time, spawned many games for it. It has a Z80 CPU in it, as did many computers and video game consoles at the time, and as implied by the name 464, it has 64 kilobytes of RAM. Its main competitor was the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum 128. So, what is there to say about this computer? Well, it never came out in the United States, which is a real shame because this is quite a well-designed computer. Internally, it had a number of forward-thinking features for its time, and the number one thing that made it as popular as it was in the UK is it was an all-in-one package, which was Amstrad was known for, making things that were all-in-one packages. Previously, before the CPC 464, they'd been known for making stereo equipment, where you would buy the stereo receiver and the speakers, and it would all be in one package. It would have everything you needed. So Mr. Alan Sugar, whose name is actually in the word Amstrad, the AMS stands for Alan Michael Sugar, and the TRAD stands for trading, so Alan Michael Sugar Trading, so thus Amstrad. He wanted to do for computers what his company had been doing for stereo equipment. He wanted to make an all-in-one product that had everything you needed to get going. And so that meant that one of the novel features of the Amstrad CPC 464 package of the time was that it came with a monitor, and that monitor was actually quite high quality. And in general, the computer itself was very high quality, especially considering its price point. I don't remember exactly how much it launched as in the UK, but I seem to remember the price of £399, which at the time was unheard of. The closest competitor to that price, I believe, was a couple £100 more than that, and it didn't have everything you needed. Other competing computers didn't come with a monitor. One other defining feature of this computer is the limited number of cables that you had to set up to get this thing going. The power supply for it was actually in the monitor, and you connected a cable from the monitor to the computer to power it, and then a cable from the computer to the monitor to get the video output that you needed. It has a built-in speaker, which I'll show you here in a moment, but it also has a line output for connecting external speakers if you so desire, which I'll also show you. Let's get in real close here and show the computer here itself. I had to zoom out really far for this computer because this is a wide-ass computer. As you can see, my hand on it right there, this is still a full-size keyboard right here, and it's a full travel keyboard too. It's not a chiclet keyboard like the early Spectrum computers had. It has an escape key, which also those computers lacked, and it doesn't have a lot of extra modifier keys like the Spectrum series does either. It simply has a caps lock and a shift, and it's got a little control down here, and that's it for modifier keys. It also has built-in arrow keys, which the Spectrum also lacked. Later models of the Spectrum did have arrow keys, but they were arranged differently. They weren't in this plus configuration like this that makes it easier to do with one hand. It also had a built-in numeric keypad, which was a popular add-on at the time for computers, so having that integrated was kind of a new thing. And then, of course, it has its primary mass storage device, which is the tape drive, which was also a common way of storing programs and games and whatever else you wanted to put on a computer in the UK back in the 80s. It takes ordinary audio cassettes. The drive itself is a slightly modified audio cassette recorder. It plays back at the same speed as an audio cassette recorder would, except there is a limited software control of the playback of the drive. So it's similar to a Commodore 64 dataset drive in that to actually get it going, you do have to press the play button to tell it you want to go, but that doesn't start the tape playing. The tape playback starting and stopping is actually software controlled. So one of the things that's different about this setup, since the cassette drive was integrated with the computer from the beginning, is number one, that it allows that kind of software control, because on other computers like the Spectrum, until the ZX Spectrum Plus 2, which I made a video about, the cassette recorder was external. You were expected as a user to provide that yourself, and therefore the computer didn't have control over that, whereas this does. And so something differently about loading tapes in this as opposed to the Spectrum is you may notice that while it's loading from the tape starts and stops playback. So it'll load like a chunk, and then it may process it a bit, and then it'll load another chunk. Also different is that there's a tape counter right there in the top. It does have a reset button, but that makes it so that you can easily find a spot on the tape where a particular program might start. I have not seen any tapes in the package that I bought that contained this computer that actually had programs at different locations other than the beginning of the tape, but that's something that is possible by this design. Press the stop on the play. There we go. That opens it up, and as you can see, indeed, it's just an audio cassette deck in there. It also has instructions right here on the computer for how to hook everything up. Like I said, you hook the monitor up to the computer right there to power it, and then actually I've never really looked closely at this before to actually show what this is trying to tell me. I think what it's trying to tell you is you need to hook it up to the monitor first, you need to put a tape in it, and then you turn on the computer, and then you can actually do something. Actually starting a program on this computer is somewhat interesting. Similar to other computers at the time, you would type in a command to tell it that you want to load from the tape, but there's a shortcut key for that on this. You push that little control right there, and you push that little enter right there, and that types in the load command for you, and then you push play to tell it that you're ready to go, previously having put a tape in there that's rewound, of course, and then you hit any key on the keyboard. I always push enter, and that actually starts it loading from the tape. And then of course it's got the usual rewind and fast forward controls. Pause, I don't know what you would use that for, I haven't seen it yet used, and record, I haven't seen it yet used in any of the stuff that I've messed with either. But presumably for like productivity applications like say a word processor or something, you could use the record to save your document back out to a tape. So, going around the unit, there's nothing on the front. Let's go around to the left side here. There's not a damn thing there except for that screw hole. And on the back is where we get to the interesting bits, because that's always the interesting bit of any good computer. Going from right to left, we have port labeled I/O. That is where you plug in the speaker output cable, and I do believe you can get stereo sound out of this computer as well, which is an improvement over the built-in audio, since the built-in speaker, which is right over there, that speaker is obviously monaural. We'll get to that here in a second. And you have a port labeled user port right here. See if I can get that better lit. There we go. That's actually the joystick port. And I have read that this particular port is Atari 2600 compatible. This is one of those many 9-pin ports on the old game consoles and computers that had kind of developed an emerging standard where they were all compatible with the Atari joystick ports. So you can use very common joysticks to go into that port, or you can even plug in something as arcane as a Sega Master System controller, or even a Genesis controller, because it all works. Apparently, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's like a siren going by. I guess somebody died. Oh well. Going further to the left here, we have printer port, and you notice that that is a card edge connector. It's not an actual port. To save on the cost of this computer, they used card edge connectors, which you can see in there. That is the motherboard right there inside there. So that card edge connector is directly on the motherboard. They use card edge connectors instead of connectors like, say, a 25-pin parallel port that you'd see on a PC to save on the cost of the computer. Going further to the left, we have a port labeled floppy disk. Now, I don't think that this port actually has anything special about it that ties it to only working with floppy disks. Although there is an adapter that you can plug into this port, which is a floppy disk adapter. It's called the DDI-1 cartridge adapter. You plug that into there, and then you plug a floppy disk drive into that. Interestingly, the DDI-1 cartridge that you plug into this is a standard floppy controller. It's actually PC compatible. So the floppy drive that you could get that plugged into the official DDI-1 adapter was a non-standard floppy drive. It wasn't used in very much stuff. It was a 3-inch floppy drive, not a 3.5-inch floppy drive. And as a result, those disks and drives are pretty scarce. But since this is a standard floppy controller that would plug into this, the pinout for the DDI-1 adapter that you would actually plug the floppy drive into the cartridge adapter that plugs into this, with very little modifications to an ordinary PC floppy cable, can plug straight into that box, and then you can plug an ordinary PC floppy drive into that, and it'll work. So that's pretty cool. That's probably something I will be investing in at some point. Going further to the left here, we see the 5-volt DC power jack, which is how the computer gets its power from the monitor. And to the left of that, we see the RGB monitor video output port, which plugs into the monitor, and that's how you get stuff out of it. That's how you can actually see what you're doing. And of course, going further left, that's the speaker. Nothing to the left of that. So we'll spin around to this side of the computer. And on this side, we have integrated volume control, because that controls the volume of that speaker right there. And we have a power switch, which is something that for some reason the Spectrum computers didn't have. You just had to unplug them from power when you were done using them. Interesting to note, the audio output on the back of this right here does not output the tape noises when you're loading from a tape. And you've probably seen that in videos of either this computer or a Spectrum on YouTube, where someone's loading from a tape and the borders of the screen are going all kind of crazy ape shit while it's loading, and it's also going while it's loading from the tape. It sounds like old modem noises. It's kind of the same thing. Those loading noises don't come out of here. They only come out of the built-in speaker. And so you can hook this audio output up to some nice speakers and have them already adjusted at a comfortable volume, and you don't get assaulted by the crazy loading noises. And if you don't want to hear the loading noises at all out of the built-in speaker, you just turn the volume all the way down, and then you won't hear them. And that volume right there does not affect the audio output out of that port right there, because that is a line level output. So, what else can we say here? I guess we flip it over and show the bottom. It's upside down. I'll flip it again. And we've got a Amstrad sticker right there, 64K microcomputer. Power supply, 5-volt DC, 2 amp. This sucker uses a lot of juice. Only 5 volts, but 2 friggin' amps. Okay, so main Korea, blah blah blah, serial number. Okay. So that's it on the computer. Now you may have noticed I don't have a monitor for this thing. So you're saying, Jeremy, you said earlier that in order to power the thing, you have to have a monitor. Well, not quite. If you get a special cable, which I got online. That's this cable right here. This cable, as it turns out, the video output on the back of this computer actually outputs standard RGB video. There's nothing special about the video output going to the monitor. And that makes it very, very nice, because that's something of a standard in Europe, RGB video. Which means you can get a cable like this right here, which this end plugs into the monitor port, actually goes in like this, and then on the other end of that cable is a standard SCART adapter. Plug, whatever you want to call this thing. This was a very popular standard in Europe, SCART connectors. You could find it on basically everything from TVs to VCRs to satellite boxes to computers. And inside there is a number of pins, and they are all dedicated to specific functions. 3 of those pins give you the RGB, some of those pins are for video sync, and some of those pins are for audio. So, what this special cable does is, on the one end of the cable is just the SCART connector. On the other end, we have the RGB video connector, which of course goes into the computer, like I said. And we have, coming out of that connector, this audio cable. So this goes into the audio port on the back of the computer. It feeds into this cable. It doesn't actually go to this connector. It just goes through the cable like that and out to the SCART connector to give you the audio in the SCART connector. Now the other weird stuff coming out of this cable right here is that right there, which of course plugs into the power on the back. That is a standard barrel connector for a DC power used on many things. And then on that, into that right there, is the reverse of that connector, which is what you plug the AC adapter into. And the AC adapter that I have for this, which I didn't set aside because there's nothing special about it, is an ordinary 5-volt DC power adapter. So you plug the power into there, plug that into the computer, plug this into the computer, and plug that into something that supports SCART, and there you go. You don't need the special monitor anymore. So how nice is that, huh? I also have set aside this here joystick, which, like I said, this takes standard joysticks, and so this one is no different. It has the standard 9-pin connector, and it has a fire button on the top, but interestingly, it also has another fire button on the front. So this computer supported 2 fire buttons, which was not supported by the Atari 2600, but is supported by the Sega Master System, and of course the Genesis controller supports 3 buttons for firing, plus a start button. So there's some fluctuation of the standard. And of course it's got the suction cups on the bottom, which are, bizarre. Interesting about this joystick, though, is on the front of it, it's got another 9-pin port, so you can daisy chain these joysticks. So you can hook up, I believe, up to 2 joysticks to the one port that's on the back. So you can have 2-player games out of one port. And that is a standard that I don't think I think that is actually not a standard that's unique to this computer. I've never seen any other situation where you can daisy chain these 9-pin joysticks. So that's very interesting to me. Oh, by the way, that particular joystick is, well, I don't think it has micro switches in it. It sounds like maybe it does, but I think on the inside it's basically like the Sinclair joystick that I showed you in my ZX Spectrum Plus 2 Jeremy Shows video, in that it makes a nice satisfying click noise like that, but I think inside are just these little buttons that are stuck on the circuit board, and they just kind of stick up like that, and they get flattened down into the circuit board, and that's how they make contact. So that's probably going to wear out eventually. This one still seems to be fine and responsive in all 4 directions, but I do need to open it up at some point and clean it because these buttons are not very responsive. Like, you have to push them at kind of a weird angle like that, and then maybe it'll work. And then, of course, since, like I've said several times now, since it takes standard joysticks, I can just plug a Genesis controller into this and play with that because I love that much more than a joystick. Now moving on to the games that this takes. Games came in a few different types of packaging because packaging was apparently not standardized for a while. You think, oh, it just comes in an ordinary audio cassette box, but no, there was more than that. Sometimes you have them in a big box, like this box for RoboCop here. Let's see if I can get this open without needing 2 hands. Inside there's actually a poster, and on the inside of the poster is the instructions for the game, so that the instructions are on one side, and then this big old RoboCop thing's on the other side. So I like that this actually survived time, this poster right here. Little internal feelies, as they're called, are very hard to come by when it comes to these old games. And then in there, of course, there you have the standard audio cassette. Specifically says Amstrad CPC 464, 664, and 6128. So it's compatible with the entire range, and just an ordinary audio cassette. This particular case has space for 2, and I'm hoping that that's just This particular plastic inset right here was made to accept up to 2 tapes. I hope it doesn't mean that this RoboCop game is missing a tape, because that would be kind of a pisser. So I'll put that back together and be all tidy and shit. Put that over there. And then sometimes tapes came in slightly smaller cases like this. I'll bring that back in just for scale purposes here. So this is a little bit smaller. It's a plastic case instead of a cardboard case. And this is Dandy, which is, and literally, this is Dandy. And this is not a bad game. I played it for a little bit. And inside, it's like a really big version of a standard audio cassette tape case. The difference being, this has room for 2 tapes inside. So again, for multi-tape games. And it's got some screenshots there on there. Let's have a look at that. Shows you some screenshots right there. Some of these games were distributed for multiple computers, such as the Spectrum and the Commodore 64. So sometimes these insets had screenshots from the other computers. So you can see right there on the side it says that these are from Spectrum screens. So why they chose to use this in the Amstrad packaging, I'm not sure, because if you look on the front of the insert right there, it actually says Amstrad/Schneider cassette. Schneider being the German distributor of the Amstrad CPC range. So yeah, that's that kind of packaging. See if I can actually get it closed there. And then we go down to what you are used to seeing an audio cassette come in, which is just a case that's just barely big enough to hold the tape itself. Now, why that says Mad, 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 I'm not exactly sure. But again, got some screenshots, which are kind of neat. See if I can get in a little closer to those. Yeah, see there you can see the game. I've actually played Manic Miner a little bit. It's not a bad game. It's a side perspective game. It's not side scrolling. You just see one screen at a time. And I've managed to snap the front of the case off there. Oh, that's good. Anyway, what else is there to say about this computer? I can't really think of anything, so that must mean this is the end of the video. So, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be doing more Jeremy shows sometime soon. And as soon as I can get the right video conversion box to get video out of this thing into my video capture and streaming setup, I'll actually be playing some games from this thing. So, hopefully I'll resolve that soon, and we'll see some CPC games. So, until then, see ya.